Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Dan, and in this video I will show you a way to add Tailwind CSS to any project. It won't matter if it's built with Create React App, Next, Vite, or plain old vanilla JavaScript. So for those of you who might not be familiar with Tailwind CSS, it is a utility CSS, a utility first CSS framework that is designed to allow you to quickly style and customize the HTML in your project with CSS while still being very easy to maintain as your project scales. So even when your project is years into development, your CSS files won't be large, bloated, out of hand, hard to understand for new developers, and full of unused CSS. One of the biggest complaints with utility-first CSS frameworks, such as Tailwind, is ugly HTML. So that means when you have 5, 10, or 15 classes attached to a single HTML tag. I would agree that this is seemingly ugly and a little hard to understand at first, but I think, in my opinion, a problem that is far easier to deal with than huge multi-thousand line CSS files having to deal with more complicated naming conventions in order to manage large global CSS files. You almost entirely get to avoid complex specificity rules and collisions because all of your CSS, or the vast majority of your CSS, are very small, simple, low specificity global styles, right? The utility classes. And then when you do have a few unique one-off styles, they can be specific to the component that they are attached to. All of this really shines when a project gets large and when you have multiple people working on the project in the same code base. I want to mention that Tailwind is not a set of styled UI components. Some people may complain, or I've heard people complain, that Tailwind projects look very similar, but it's not the same thing as Bootstrap. This is just a set of styles like padding, margin, font, and you can completely customize it. So you can get very different styles, colors, customizations, basically everything you would get in writing vanilla CSS, but you just have a bunch of these classes already created for you that you can use. Something else to mention is that Tailwind CSS is going to shine, or you're going to get the most benefit out of it when you use it in conjunction with some sort of component framework, such as React, Vue, or Svelte. This allows you to encapsulate the styles, the form, and the function of a component, such as a button or card, in one place where it's likely to change together, instead of having it spread out across numerous other files. And when you reuse a button or card or some other element multiple times throughout your code base or your HTML, you don't have to repeat these 5, 10, 15 classes over and over again, because it's already bundled into the component, and then you're just repeating the use of that component 5, 10, or 15 times. If you want to try it out for yourself, I think the easiest way to do so is to head on over to play.tailwindcss.com. They have an interactive code editor there. You can hover over different elements and see exactly the CSS that this pre-generated Tailwind class represents. This in some cases could be a way to learn CSS. And then the other thing you can do is you can basically start typing and get code completion like you would in VS Code or another editor where you have this Tailwind IntelliSense plugin. So you'll be able to go down and select the type of blue you want. So we can have a very dark blue background, and we can type text, and we can get a preview of all the different classes that represent text, such as size. We can type text white, and we can give this area white text. Looks like it's being overwritten by other text colors down here. I suppose we could just type text white here. You'll even see that it's going to give you a warning that this particular part had a class that applied to the same CSS property. And then we get a live preview on the right. Quite convenient as a little playground to experiment with. So let's talk about different ways or different methods you can use to add Tailwind to your project. If you're just writing plain HTML and CSS, the easiest way might be to add Tailwind through the Content Delivery Network, or CDN. You drop it in your header. You can then use Tailwind classes throughout your HTML. This is very good for prototyping, but it's probably not great for production. The next way you might add Tailwind to your project is to integrate with your current framework's build process. So for common frameworks like Next, Nuxt, Vite, SvelteKit. You can install or add Tailwind and it will automatically be a part of the dev server and your framework's production build system. A third option, and the one I'm most interested in, is using the Tailwind CLI. You will need Node.js for this, but by doing this, you'll be able to add Tailwind to any project. It'll be the same workflow regardless of which framework, or even if you're using plain HTML and JavaScript files. To demonstrate this, I'm going to go ahead and create a project folder. Now that I've created and moved into my project folder, I'm going to initialize a Next.js app, not because I need Next.js, but it scaffolds the project pretty nicely. If you wanted to, you could use npm init and initialize a plain node project. That would work as well. In this case, let's go ahead and run it with npx create next app. Okay, I forgot to add the dot at the end of npx create next app latest in order to use the existing directory as the project name. Okay, my project was created successfully. npm run dev should be the command to start the development server. And I do indeed have a working development server on localhost 3000. Okay, so what I've done so far is opened up my project in Visual Studio Code. You'll notice that while there are some dev dependencies, it's mostly related to Next and TypeScript. There's no Tailwind CSS at the moment. In fact, we don't need to install Tailwind CSS in these dev dependencies, but we do need a Tailwind config file. We can create a Tailwind config file by running npx, emphasis on the x, npx Tailwind CSS init. Hit yes if you need to install Tailwind CSS. And over here on the right, you'll see that Tailwind config.js was created. If we open that up, we get a blank or a pretty much empty Tailwind configuration file. The first thing we're going to want to do is add some patterns to the content array here. So this will tell Tailwind where to look for files that might contain classes. So I've entered some examples here. Not all of them are going to apply to this project, but if you had an index.html file in the root of your directory, you could just place that here and then it'll look in that one. If you had it in a public directory, you could put public/index.html. If you had different files located in a source folder, you could use these glob patterns. So within the source folder, or within any directory within it, any file that ended in .html or .js would be a potential source for Tailwind classes, right? The CLI program would look in those files. But the one that's going to work for our project is we're expecting all of our stuff to be in the pages directory at the moment. Let's see here. We might also add this components directory. I don't know if I'll do it for this example, but next project, you might have a file of React components that you would also want to inspect for classes. In this case, I'm going to delete these first ones and stick with these two. So what I've done next is I've launched the development server and we have a bunch of stuff already created here by Next.js. I just want to go ahead and clear it out. All right, now that I have that cleared out, we can go ahead and save that again, and then you get the bare bones stuff. If we try and add a Tailwind class here, right? So if we go class name and then we want, say, red text, right? Red 500 text. We do get assistance from the Tailwind CSS plugin, right, for VS Code. If we save it, we'll notice that we don't actually get red text here yet, right? This is because we haven't yet connected it to respond, like it doesn't automatically detect when we enter these classes yet. So that's what we're going to do in the next step. So what we need to do is create a file that is going to take the input into the Tailwind CSS compiler, so to speak. So if we call this Tailwind input CSS, and we're just putting it in this styles folder to go along with what Next.js is doing. So in this input file, we can then add our Tailwind directives. There's going to be base, Tailwind components, and Tailwind utilities. These are different categories that Tailwind will then compile your CSS into in the output file, which we'll get into in a second. Now we need to run the npx command for Tailwind CSS. We're going to do -i. So this is going to be the path to the input file. In this case, it's going to be styles and then Tailwind input.css. Okay, with the -o for the output file, we can also include it in the styles directory. I'm going to call it Tailwind output.css. And if we run this, it will compile our existing CSS into the outputted file. All right, so we now have this new file called output CSS, and in it, you'll see a lot of CSS already created. So this is going to be Tailwind's pre-flight or CSS reset. You can go through here and inspect it, see what they do. I'm going to go ahead and find where our red text ended up. Okay, so if you see here way at the bottom, we have text red 500. Now that matches what we had in this h1 file. So it saw that we added text red 500 in this file, and then it included that in the outputted CSS. On the right, you'll notice we still don't have red text. So what we need to do is in our app or the index file, but I think in Next.js, somewhere you need to import the actual CSS file. So in Next.js, we're going to need to import it into the app _app tsx. Okay, so once I did that and hit save, you'll notice a couple things. One, the header size was reset. It went back to 0. The other thing is we do now have red text. Excellent. However, if I change this to green text, once again, it does not change to green. In fact, the red text went away because it no longer sees the red text class, but it can't find the green text class. This is because the Tailwind CLI program is not continually watching our files for changes. How do we fix that? Well, we can run the same command as before, but we can add the watch flag. So now in my terminal, this is going to continue running and we have green text. If we change it back to red and hit save, we get red text. If we want to add an incredibly large size text, we can just hit 6XL large and we can go there. We can also, I think, do text center and it will center it in the page. So now it's responding in real time, or as soon as we hit save, both the build system of Next.js is watching for file changes and the Tailwind CLI is watching for changes to our CSS classes in the files we pointed it to in the Tailwind config. So you might be thinking, all right, Dan, that's all well and good, but how annoying is it going to be to always have to remember to compile the Tailwind classes or the Tailwind CSS files before every time I want to either build my application or remember to start this watch program up every time I want to develop on it? Well, what we can do is take advantage of our package.json file and we can add a couple scripts to it. So what I did is I added a Tailwind build script. So this command is going to be basically what we typed in before: npx Tailwind CSS, path to the input file, and the path to the output file. Now, since this is the build command, I'm not going to add the watch flag because this is just going to be run before it builds. And in our build script, we can modify this by putting npm run Tailwind build. So now this will run, anytime I run build, it will first build my Tailwind CSS files, and then it will build the application. If you were adding this to a vanilla.js project, you could just have a build command that literally just ran npm run Tailwind build, or this code here. I'm going to duplicate this build line. I'm going to change this to Tailwind watch, and then at the end of this, I am going to add the watch flag. Okay, so now this will keep this program running, and then in the dev command, which is the command to run the dev server in Next.js, we can npm run. Notice this is npm and not npx because all I want it to do here is refer to this other script that I made, whereas this is actually will actually download Tailwind CSS if it's not already in the system. npm run Tailwind watch and next dev. Okay, so we're getting close, but this is not quite done yet. What would be nice is if the Tailwind watch or the Tailwind CLI dev server and then the next dev server started and stopped together. To do this, I am going to install a package called concurrently, and then I'm going to modify this a little further. So concurrently is going to start and stop these processes together. So we've created, or we're going to type concurrently to do it as the initial command. We're going to add the kill others flag, and then we need to put these commands in quotes. So we're going to use a slash to escape. We're going to remove the ampersand. Okay, and so basically concurrently with the kill others flag, the first command is going to be npm run tailwind watch, and then the second command is going to be next dev. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. So now when I run npm run dev, it's going to look a little different. Here's the concurrently command, and you'll see these different lines in the terminal prefixed by ones and zeros. 0 is going to be the first item in the list of commands you gave it, and then 1 is going to be the second item. So these will correspond to output from the npm run dev, and this is output from the Tailwind command. So if I refresh the dev server, it is still working. If I go back to my HTML, my JSX, whatever this is called, we can go back to green text. Oops, let me fix that. We're back to green text. I can make changes. Let's see here. Let's just do an example. For instance, I could make this flex and a flex column, and we could do items, by the way, items, let's see here. Yeah, items center. So that will center it in the one axis, and then justify center will center it in the other axis. Oh, this is going to be a height thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this height thing, right? This thing comes up. So if I'm trying to center this in the middle, and let's go to our Tailwind input file, and we can add classes here. So this is a common thing. We can add the body and main and all of these things. We could say the min height is 100% on all of those. So this is, you can just add regular CSS into this Tailwind input CSS. And if we check the output, by the way, this output will be updated in real time. You'll see that it will add any CSS we enter there into our output CSS as well. And then if we come back to index.tsx, we can then increase the height of our div here by saying h full. I think I was incorrect maybe with min height. Okay, so in next there's this div that sits, we have the body that's full height. There's this extra div that sits in there. So we're gonna have to add, let's see here. So dot under double underscore next comma, not a dot. Okay, so our HTML is full, our body's full height, our div is full height, our main is full height, our H1 is full height. H1 does not need to be full height. That's an issue. Okay, got rid of that. So we don't need main full height anyway. That's full height from the CSS in the background. Okay, we have successfully centered text both horizontally and vertically. I guess that wasn't necessarily part of the video, but there you go. All right, anyway, we can now quickly do some CSS stuff, and we have the full capability of Tailwind with us. We can write custom CSS anytime we want to. We could either do it in this global CSS file or in some other way. You can combine other things with Tailwind, no problem. If you don't like the global reset that Tailwind does, you can come in here, you can add another property called pre-flight, and you can say it's false. Okay, I was incorrect. I think maybe this was updated in a different version. Instead of pre-flight false, it is actually going to be in this core plugins. So core plugins pre-flight false. Okay, so now the style is back, right? And then I don't know if I need to restart this. I don't think so, but let's redo it anyway. And so what we should see then is now our Tailwind, okay, see our Tailwind output file is much smaller, right? So it's only basically these design tokens that Tailwind needs, and then also the CSS the CSS classes, the Tailwind CSS classes we have actually used. So if you don't want all that stuff changing your existing styles for some reason, or you want it to play nicely with another library, that's a good thing to check out. So we showed how this can be integrated with a build server, or excuse me, a dev server for any project, or even if it was just a HTML project or plain HTML project. Let's go ahead and double check and make sure that our build command is working. So if I run npm run build, okay, we get the output expected from the Next.js build process. Okay, so I think I might actually need to, for Next.js, this is a Next.js thing. You can do npm run, let's see here. We can add and next export, right? This is so I can just get a folder with the static files in it. Yeah, okay. So now files are written to an out directory. And if I go in here, I'll have my plain HTML. Let's see here. If we open this, I wonder if I can just preview it here. Okay, I figured it out. And yes, all right. So if I run the live server from the out directory, it will load our files. In particular, it will load the index file and wherever it has its. And if we inspect this file, we can see that in the head, in the head, we have a style sheet here. Okay, so in this case, it's going to inject it into this style sheet. And this is where we're going to have our Tailwind styles. And at the bottom, it's going to include all of the styles that we used and even our custom CSS we added here at the end. So if you're still watching this video, once again, thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. If you enjoyed it, please hit like. If you'd like to see or encourage me to make more videos, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.